Hello. This is really interesting, folks. You know me. I am President Obonjo of Laughter Republic, and I'm here to introduce you to someone who sent me a Twitter, or rather a tweet to be precise. I think they call it Twitter or tweet. I don't know. I'm just still very new to Twitter, but I think it's a tweet, and he basically said that. If I remember correctly, that I might get punched on the face because of the uniform that I am wearing. So I thought it would be a good idea to get Steve to come and talk to me about, because I believe he's an ex. Oh, he's disappeared. I believe he's an ex. Yeah, you're an ex-army officer. Is that correct? From the British
Army? I was a corporal.
Oh, you were a corporal. Okay, so yeah,
not an officer. No, well, okay. Non-commissioned officer.
Non-commissioned officer, but you were in the British Army anyway.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, and we've been having chats about this, and I have shared some of my experiences, both in terms of people taking offense by seeing me wear this. And this is, I have to say to you, this is just comedy. I'm sure you know it is comedy. It is not real. I'm not pretending to be a member of the British Army. I'm not pretending to be a British Army officer. So I thought it'd be a good idea to get a sense of why you said what you said, because I've had experiences where people have got really angry with me saying, oh, you're pretending to be a British Army officer when you're not.
Yeah, well, I think for me, not an issue. And for most people, whether serving soldiers or ex-soldiers, not an issue. For some people, it can get a little bit, especially with medals and cap badges. What you've got on the front of your hat there, that's the Royal Artillery badge, and that's a regiment of the British Army that goes back a long way, and people who serve in it are really proud to serve in it. And they feel that I've earned that badge because I'm a member of that regiment, so you shouldn't be wearing it. And the same with medals, fictional medals, pretend ones that you've bought, not a big deal. But if it's a real medal, again, sometimes people get a little bit upset that the Americans actually have it as a criminal offense. They call it stolen valor. And people hunt down false wearers of medals. The British Army community, if you go on, there's a website called ARSE. I don't know if you've seen it, ARRSE, and it's mostly serving an ex-soldier, some of them quite old like me, and it's mostly humor, but there's also a lot of sort of mutual support and storytelling. It's a really good resource for anyone who's interested in attitudes within the British Army, maybe a few years behind the time, but it's there. And they've got this thing called Walt hunting. You know the story by James Thurber, Walter Mitty?
Yeah.
Well, within the military community, if you want to call it that, there's a thing called a Walt, who's either someone who never served but pretended they did, or someone who had minimal experience and bigs it up a little bit. Oh yeah, I was in the SAS, can't talk about it. I was a beer. And so there's a crossover between people who take genuine offense at insignia and uniform items being worn by others. And I think that's a bit silly. And then this American term, stolen valor, or British term, Walt. And I just think that for your stage persona, and I've looked at a lot of it on YouTube and I've fallen about, it's really good. But I just think that as a courtesy and as a self-preservation thing, if you could find the badge of a regiment that doesn't exist anymore, a defunct regiment. I looked them up, actually. I'll send you a link to a site selling them. For a few pounds, you could change that badge out for one from a regiment that's been dissolved 100 years ago. And it still looks convincing. It still is a British Army thing, but there's no one around who'll go, oh, that's my regiment, how dare you? So I just thought that might be a useful suggestion for you.
Yeah, that's interesting enough. I remember well over a year ago, I got this email from someone out of the blue who said, I don't know whether you are in the British Army, whether you served in the British Army, or whether you're a comedy act, but I take offense that you are actually wearing this Royal Artillery badge. And so I had to write back to him to say, look, I'm not taking the piss in the British Army. I respect the British Army, and this is just a comedy act. And he said, look, I know you're funny, but, just like you said, people have really died wearing this. And so, so the point, I've got a couple of questions for you. If that's the case, because I just traveled, I went to a place called Stevenage, and I was driving past Stevenage, and I saw this secondhand military shop. And there is where I bought this this and everything else. So if people are taking offense by this, and not many, as you said, why do you have secondhand shops selling military uniforms to
a lot of people are, there's a strange breed, and it's not me, but I'm aware of them in the same way that I can see out of my window a hedgehog. I'm not a hedgehog, but I'm aware of them. There's a breed called militaria collectors, and I don't understand. I just don't understand. I mean, I'm ex-army and I've got a strong interest in things to do with the military, but I'm not going to fill a room of my house up with old cat badges or medals or anything like that. I'm just not that. If I want to see them, I'll go to a museum, and sometimes I do. You know, the Imperial War Museum is a sobering place to spend a day. But I don't want to be in my house, but some people do, and there is a thriving trade in these things. And what I mentioned before, these guys, the Waltz, the people who in their head, yeah, they're a fat 55-year-old, but in their head they're 23 and they're a sergeant in the special forces, you know, and they only do it in their house and they dress up. And there are people who do this. They dress like you do, but not as part of a well thought through comedy routine. It's some sort of weird fantasy in their head. I don't understand it, but they do exist. They do. And there's also these guys. Have you heard of the airsoft? You know, paintballing. Which is good fun, actually, if you ever got a 15-year-old, so you've got an excuse to go without looking stupid. Paintballing is good fun. There's another iteration of paintballing called airsoft, where grown men, again, guys in their 30s, 40s, 50s, they dress in pretty realistic modern combat gear, and they have weapons that are indistinguishable from a real service weapon, an M16, an SA-80, whatever it might be. And they shoot these tiny little plastic pellets, and they sting if they hit you, but they're not going to do you any harm. So they wear goggles and they just go around shooting each other. And I think some of those guys, they wear this stuff, combat gear, when they're playing. But I've got a feeling that some of them dress a little bit like you at home as well.
Well, I'm only dressed up like this at home because I knew I wanted to have a chat with you. But
well,
also,
I just like this. I thought this would be.
But and also, it's important to say that I also perform at home. I do Zoom gigs, you know.
Cool. You got to though, yeah.
But I have no choice.
You're wearing a mask. How close are you to the screen?
Say that again.
How close are you to the screen? Should I be wearing a mask?
No. You're fine.
Okay.
You're fine. You shouldn't. You don't need to worry about. You don't need to worry about Corona, but. What you haven't been told is that Ebola transforms through Zoom.
Wow. I should have got the updated phone.
But yeah,
that's one thing I was going to ask you. One of the sort of things that watching your act or bits of it on YouTube, I think that part of what you're reflecting is echoes of sort of post-colonialism and the way that sort of some African countries, as they sort of became non-colonial, that promise of democracy and everything's going to be great sort of fell on its arse a little bit. You're personifying that a little. Yes. So I get that the British uniform is absolutely part of it for good reasons, for good historical reasons and relevant reasons.
Yeah.
Is that deliberate?
Yeah, that is deliberate, but also the fact that apart from the fact that my view has always been that before these people were called dictators, they were very good leaders. As soon as they fell out with the West, they became dictators. You know what I'm saying? Because they supported it. The West supported them.
Probably something in that.
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot.
And then when they started to forget to have elections and
yeah, exactly.
Do something. Election. Oh shit! That was 20 years ago. Never mind. I'll be fine.
and you know, most African countries at the time were under military dictatorship. I certainly grew up in Nigeria, and the way I am is because I grew up during the military regime. You know, there were lots of.
Do you mind asking how old you are?
I'm over 50.
So I worked until a year ago. I work on building sites, and the job I had until a year ago with my friend Ben. He's also Nigerian. He's just turned 50, and I spent more time with him that year than I did with my wife. A lot more time. Okay. 12, 13-hour days, 6 days a week. So we got to know each other really well. It's interesting to hear you sort of allude to that because he had some startling stories to tell.
Yeah,
very startling. Yeah. His father was quite senior in the Nigerian government in the early 70s.
Okay.
and he became very wealthy despite his salary not being that hot, you know.
Well, that's another story entirely. But you know, when we talk about leadership, that's why democracy makes me laugh, because when we talk about leadership, this is what I grew up. Military is what I grew up. You know, having military rulers. That's my interpretation of leadership in my brain. Yeah, but I know there are other forms of leadership. But this has been really, really interesting. You know, I want to ask you something else. You know what's really interesting about this is that you're right to say that it's only a minority of people who take offense by this. If I tell you the number of army officers that have been in an audience, I didn't even know they were army officers, who then wrote to me and said, "Oh, we've got some uniform for you. Give me your address. We've got some badges." And they actually send me they get what I'm about. They really do. It's just the minority. But I was going to say this. How come they don't take offense with Dad's army? How come they don't take offense with the fact that...
I think, you know, I talked about this. My grandfather, he died 25 years ago, but he served World War II, and he was just a good guy. A lot of his friends of that generation found Dad's Army, the TV show, because it was current, you know, mid 70s into the 80s. It was still being repeated. It's a big cultural thing in the UK. And I remember having this exact conversation, and his view was, it's respectful. I mean, they gently took the mickey out of the characters of the Dad's Army, but they never suggested that they were cowardly, inefficient, or not doing the right thing. They only suggested that they were sort of bumbling village men who, had the Germans actually invaded, they would have died at their post. They really would, and that's true. You know, the Home Guard, Dad's Army, deserved that respect, because they really would have fought. They really would have fought. So the fact that they were gently taking the mickey, effectively soldier to soldier, because the guys who wrote that were ex-servicemen themselves. Yeah. One thing, my regiment, these guys, Royal Signals, also known as 2 bits, because the badge is in 2 bits, or the Silver Surfers. I've been out 20 years, we get called the scaly backs by the rest of the army. And it's just gentle teasing. It's for a reason. The original radios that people used to wear would rub their backs raw, so you'd get scars on your back and be a scaly back. There you go. But it sounds offensive, but from another soldier, it's not. I wouldn't want to be called a scaly back by a civilian. I would feel that was slightly impolite, discourteous, presumptuous would be the right word. So I don't think Dad's Army, either as it was presented or as it's talked about now, even the remake, the film, isn't discourteous. It's respectful and taking the mickey gently, like you would for a family member. I think that would be the answer I'd give to that question. Yeah,
but you've seen my comedy on stage. You haven't seen me live, but you've seen my YouTube. It doesn't take the mickey on the British Army or the British military.
This is probably why so many people are approving and sending you bits of equipment. It's I think the only, and I'm not criticizing at all. As I say, I'm not offended.
No, I know.
It's just the fact that it is a live badge of a real regiment that's around now. Yeah. And has lost people in combat, you know, well within living memory. They lost guys in Afghanistan, they lost guys in Iraq, they lost guys in the Falklands, Northern Ireland, going right back. They lost like 115,000 killed in World War I, you know. So it's not for me, but for some, as you found out, probably not officers, probably private soldiers, or gunners they call them. They might go, "Oh, that's my badge. You shouldn't be wearing that." Which is why I just thought I'd send that tweet as suggesting.
I do appreciate that wholeheartedly. I do appreciate the tweets, and like I said, it just reminded me of, you know, I even remember there was a time I was traveling on the train from Bristol, and
just like that.
And I was sat like that. And you people talk about white privilege. I get military privilege just wearing this. and this training inspector saw me, and he just basically said, "You served our country, move to first class."
Tell me, was it exactly as you're wearing now?
Yes.
Because I mean, one of the things, I don't know if it's deliberate or not, but the fact you've got a corporal stripe with an extra stripe on top. Yeah. That's clearly not right.
Yeah, exactly. But that is meant to make it comical. That's not meant to make it real. Even people have said to me, "Oh, you really should have more medals." And I just feel that if I have more medals, for example, that makes it so real. But the guy who stopped me on the train and said, "Move to first class," eventually he looked at the uniform and he said, "What regiment are you, sir? What regiment?" And I told him the War of Mirth, and he just started laughing because he could tell that it was comedy.
He'd already put you in first class.
Yeah. And by then he put me in first class. But on that day, before he put me on first class, I had an altercation. There were two guys who kept watching me, and then they went for me. They wanted to really have a go, screaming and saying, "You shouldn't wear the uniform. You're not entitled to wear the uniform." And then three other people defended me. In short, 5 white men, 2 against 3. That was the first time that sort of thing has happened. Yeah, and the 3 of them just defended me to say, "Look, this is comical. You know what? Why are you attacking him?" And they left me. But it was.
I think that without wanting to sound too pompous here, the people who did wear that uniform and did fight in the wars of the last century and this one. May not have said it themselves in these words, but this is more sort of Daily Express leader words, but they fought for our freedom, and that includes the freedom to wear that uniform on stage and make a joke. That that is the sort of thing that wouldn't happen under a dictatorship, Your Excellency. So, back home in where you're president, you wouldn't allow this to happen. Of course, you wouldn't allow people to dishonour the uniform of the presidential guard.
Yeah.
But here in a democracy, you can.
Okay, so what badges? So you're saying remove this. What badges would you recommend?
My only suggestion, I'll send you a link, but I just went on eBay and I put in defunct regiment badges, and there's one actually that I don't know if this would be sort of part of what we talked about a few minutes ago, the sort of reflections on colonialism and things. There's a badge. Oh, it's on this phone. I can't show you. I'll send you after we finish.
Okay.
It's called the King's Colonial Corps or the King's Colonial Regiment. I'd not heard of it, but when I looked it up, it was a 1920s, 30s, 40s thing where the British rulers recruited local guys to be soldiers, and the good, loyal, brave soldiers, and they fought. But they fought under the cat badge, the King's Colonial Regiment. I don't know. It might be that's something to sort of toy with, but there's loads of regiments that no longer exist. Loads. I mean, dozens and dozens. And Boris Johnson's just getting rid of a couple more, of course, having promised not. And said before the election, he said, "Don't vote Labour. Don't vote Labour. You can't trust them on defence." By the way, we're going to.
You're a bit political, aren't you? So a lot of these regiments were defunct because the government collapsed them. Is that what happened, or just natural wastage?
If you think about in the Victorian days, the army was, by comparison to today, huge. There was about 180,000 people as permanent soldiers in the army when we only had a population of 30 million. So mostly they were split into very small regiments that each county would have one. This is back in the 1850s, 60s, 70s. For example, the Cheshire Regiment, where I'm in Cheshire, would have 2 battalions. A battalion would be 600 or 700 men. One of them would be at home, serving in the United Kingdom or Ireland. The other one would be in India or elsewhere in the empire. And then after 4 years, they'd swap. And most counties had their own regiment. And there were some regiments that weren't county-based, like some of the Guards regiments and the artillery. But there were loads and loads of these. And as the army needed to be smaller, certainly after World War II, but also towards the end of the Victorian days, some of these regiments were amalgamated. So the Gloucestershire Regiment, for example, very famously has 2 badges, one at the front, one at the back of its hat. They were amalgamated with the Wiltshire Regiment because the 2 counties are next to each other. And then the Berkshire Regiment was also added. And by the end, they were called the Alphabet Regiment because they weren't just the Gloucestershire Regiment, they were the GWB. Anyway, there were 4 or 5 regiments amalgamated into one. So the forerunners of those regiments were dissolved, And there's lots and lots and lots to choose from. There really are. And you can get the badges for £4, £5, £10,
Okay, cool.
Just only a suggestion. To me, I would come to your act. I can't wait to get back to live comedy. Can't wait. But as I say, partly as a small courtesy to the people who might feel a little bit ruffled by it, and partly for self-preservation if the 3 defenders aren't there next time.
And I get punched.
Going to suggest it.
I've done some army gigs. Trying to remember I can't remember the places now because of the pandemic, but I remember going to this place somewhere outside London and 200 army officers.
Yeah.
And they didn't tell them that I was coming because it wasn't advertised. They just said comedians are coming. And then they introduced me. Wow.
So proud.
Yeah, well, I had to win them over. The first 5 minutes was tough because it was like, what the? But yeah, it was great. It was great. Look, it's been a pleasure, Steve. Thank you so much for
No problem.
joining
I'll send
me.
you the link to those badges I found. As I say, just purely suggestion.
Yeah, no. I look. I've actually made some real military friends. You know, they send me stuff. I remember the last gig I did before the pandemic. This guy just said to me, "Oh, you're not wearing this properly. You need to move it down this way. But you're supposed to be a general. Why do you have a lance corporal?" And
yeah.
And then he said, "Oh, give me your." Yeah.
That's before I got promoted.
Okay, yeah. and he said, you know, give me your address. I've got some medals for you. And I just got lots of medals that came through. I couldn't believe it. I just couldn't believe it.
What are the ones you're wearing now? I couldn't see them on the YouTube video.
Oh no, this is a new uniform that I'm wearing now.
Desert Storm, General Service, 2 UNs.
Yeah.
What are the red ones? Is that military? Oh, God, I don't know. Ah, and Sergeant Major on the arm.
Yeah. So the only uniform that I've had, the one you saw on YouTube, I've had that for years. So and I've put on a bit of weight because of the lockdown.
Yeah. Well, what you're wearing is called number 2 dress uniform. Okay. It's like the second poshest, and the very poshest uniform you wear is usually blue for most regiments, and it's called number 1 dress. Yeah. When I got married in '91, and I had a set of number 1s made for me, tailored, and over the next year, I lent them to 3 other guys. So that uniform's been married 4 times now. And I found it not long ago when we were moving house, and I'll try.
You just reminded me. Give me 2 minutes. There's something I need to share with you. 2 minutes. Okay, so when I bought this uniform, I took it back home. I've only had it for about a month now, and there was this note in the uniform in the pocket, and I had no idea that there was a note in it until I just felt it, and I just thought, let me find out what this is about. And it reads, "Grace, dear beloved, for life, for love, and just for the crack, we have come here tonight for a little bit of a snack, to hear the tales of a career well spent, of misdemeanors and thanks generated by one portly gent. So before the stories abound, let's give thanks for stuff from the ground, to the food that we eat and the grapes that we drink. Cheers to all. You can tell me later just what you think. Amen." So I'm wondering, was this a funeral service, or was this someone having an affair?
If it's tales of a portly gent, I wonder if it's a retirement, what they call maybe a dining out, because it's a sergeant major's jacket you're wearing, a regimental sergeant major. It might be a quartermaster sergeant major, but it's the highest non-commissioned rank before you become an officer. So a guy wearing that would have been in the army 18, 20 years before he got that rank.
Wow.
So that sounds to me like either a colleague who is leaving, retiring, or maybe being dined out, as in being posted to a different unit. So he's no longer a member of that mess. So they have a formal dinner to dine him out. And there's usually speeches, a great deal of drinking, usually port and lots of it. And then increasingly unpleasant stories about the individual concerned as the evening wears on.
Okay.
Bring a few of those views, okay? they get a bit messy. So it sounds like you might be right. It might be a funeral thing, but I suspect it's more retirement or dining out. Grace.
Fascinating stuff. Look, on that note, thank you so much for your time, Steve. And I will let you know when I am back on stage delivering my presidential speeches.
Yeah.
I will let you know.
Follow you on Twitter.
You follow me on Twitter as well. So thank you so much.
I'm going to change my CV to include comedy consultant.
Yeah. You're my consultant. But I wouldn't actually call it comedy consultant. It's probably just army consultant. Maybe that's what it is. British Army consultant.
I'll put both. I'll put both on LinkedIn.
Okay. So comedy consultant, and so you love comedy a lot. Who are your favorite comedians apart from me?
Apart from you, Stuart Lee. I'd watch his stuff all day, every day.
Okay.
And I like. Do you know a guy called Jerry Sadowitz?
Yes, I've heard of him. The
Jerry
Jewish guy.
Sadowitz.
Is a Jewish guy.
Guy's Jewish guy.
Yeah.
Also a great crowd magician. Incredible stage act, and there's stuff he did on TV in the 80s, 90s. It's still astonishing, absolutely astonishing. But we've got a comedy club in Chester. Obviously, it's shut at the moment, isn't it?
Oh, so who runs that?
I don't know.
What's it called?
That's a good question. There's only one, so we don't need to know what it's called. Because if you say we're going to the comedy club, there's only one in the city.
And so you've seen lots of acts there then.
Used to, yeah. I suppose I've been working away so much. The last 3 or 4 years, I've not been living at home. I've been working away in the week.
Yeah.
So I tend to spend the weekends with the family and evenings. I'm not there because I'm in somewhere else. But we will start again. Start again. I saw Richard Herring doing his tour when he was wearing the Hitler moustache.
Okay.
Oh, he was pretty good. Pretty good. But most of them are just like local touring comics. And
you're mentioning all my rivals, you know. but thank you. So I remember meeting Stuart Lee. He did 2 shows in Leicester Square just before the pandemic. Leicester Square Theatre. Fantastic shows.
What was the name of that tour? Because I saw him at
look, I honestly can't remember now, but there were 2 good shows. Not that they weren't good, they were fantastic. And I met him after the show, went downstairs to where they were drinking. And yeah, it was great. It was great. And then I think a couple of weeks later, the pandemic came.
That's
for
everything, yeah.
Okay, yeah. Look, Steve, thank you so much. And we'll keep in touch. Thank you very much. Thank you. Goodbye. Bye.
In your wrong, that's a deliberately bad salute.
Thank you so much. Thanks for joining me. Bye. Bye.